Experience. Strength is often admired in its polished form, the image of someone standing tall, unshaken, and untouchable. But strength, especially the strength of a woman who builds herself alone, experience, is not born in applause or admiration. It is forged in the quiet spaces of solitude, in the moments when there is no one to lean on, no one to catch her if she stumbles. Experience. She learns early that solitude is not simply the absence of others, but the presence of herself. It is in that silence that she must listen carefully, because the only voice guiding her forward is her own experience. When a woman builds herself alone, she does so not because she always wanted to, but because life demanded it. She has faced doors that would not open, opportunities that were withheld, experience, and times when she had to be her own provider, her own comforter, and her own advocate. In those moments, solitude becomes both her teacher and her test. She learns to trust herself, experience, to make choices without guarantees, to step forward when no one has gone before her. Each decision, whether it led to success or failure, becomes another stone in the foundation of her strength, experience. There are nights when the weight of this independence feels almost unbearable, when she longs for someone else to share the burden, when she envies those who have hands reaching out to lift them. And yet, experience, she knows that waiting for rescue is not an option. The woman who builds herself alone discovers that her solitude is not punishment, it is possibility. It sharpens her instincts, it forces her to grow, experience, and it reveals to her the depth of her own resilience. She becomes intimately familiar with her fears, because in solitude there is nowhere to hide from them. But instead of being ruled by those fears, experience, she learns to sit with them, to understand them, and to move forward anyway. She discovers that solitude strips away the noise, the opinions, the expectations of others, experience, and leaves her face to face with her truest self. And in that raw encounter, she realizes that strength is not a mask she wears for the world, but a muscle she develops in the quiet, unseen hours. Experience, recognition is sweet, but it is fleeting. The woman who builds herself alone learns early that applause is not the measure of her worth, nor the confirmation of her progress. Experience, she learns that the true test of her strength comes not in the spotlight but in the shadows, in the hours of effort no one sees, in the sacrifices that pass unnoticed. Resilience becomes her quiet companion. Experience, a quality that does not wait for validation but thrives in the silence of persistence. Every morning she rises, not because someone cheers her on, experience, but because she has decided that her journey cannot wait for approval. There are no cameras to capture the small battles, getting up when she feels defeated, showing up when she feels invisible, experience, pushing forward when every part of her aches for rest. These moments, uncelebrated and unacknowledged, are the raw ingredients of resilience. They are not glamorous, but they are real. And in their repetition, experience, she becomes unshakable. There are times when she questions the fairness of it all. Why must her hardest work go unnoticed? Why must her most significant growth happen in silence? Experience. But she begins to see that recognition, while comforting, does not sustain her. It cannot replace the discipline she cultivates in the absence of witnesses. Experience. She learns that resilience is not a performance but a practice, and that the value of her strength lies not in being seen, but in being lived. She does not wait for applause to confirm her effort. Experience. Because she knows applause can be fickle. She has seen how quickly admiration fades when people are no longer entertained. But resilience is not built on the shifting sands of public opinion. Experience. It is built in the grit of repetition, in the courage to endure failure without collapsing, in the ability to start again after disappointment. Each setback is not a reason to stop, but a reason to persist. Experience, and each act of persistence strengthens her more than recognition ever could. There is a dignity in her resilience because it belongs entirely to her. Experience. It is not borrowed from the cheers of others or dependent on their acknowledgement. It is the result of her own choices, her own battles, her own relentless decision to continue. In that decision, experience, repeated over and over, she creates a strength that no one can give her and no one can take away. Vulnerability is often misunderstood as weakness, but for the woman who builds herself alone, experience, it becomes a hidden source of power. She has learned that strength is not about the armor she wears, but about the courage to remove it when the weight becomes too heavy. Experience. Vulnerability is not the absence of struggle. It is the raw honesty of admitting that struggle exists. It is the willingness to confront her fears, her insecurities, her doubts, experience, and still move forward with them in her hands. There are moments when she feels the sting of isolation, when the silence of her solitude presses against her chest. In those moments, Experience, it would be easy to harden herself completely, to numb her emotions in the name of survival. But she chooses something far more radical. She chooses to remain open. Experience. She allows herself to feel the disappointment of failure, the pain of rejection, the uncertainty of not knowing what comes next. And instead of hiding these emotions, she lets them teach her. Experience. Vulnerability reveals to her what strength alone cannot. That to be fully human is to embrace the tender parts of herself as much as the resilient ones. Experience. It is in vulnerability that she discovers her capacity for connection. Even though she builds herself alone, she understands that showing her humanity allows others to see their own reflected back. Experience. Vulnerability becomes a bridge. It tells others, I too have fallen, I too have doubted, I too have felt afraid. In this openness, she does not lose strength, she multiplies it. Experience. Because she is no longer defined by the illusion of perfection, but by the authenticity of her journey. She begins to see that vulnerability is not an obstacle to strength, but a deepening of it. Experience. It takes far more courage to say, I am struggling, but I will continue, than to hide behind the mask of invincibility. She realizes that the cracks in her armor do not weaken her, they make her real. Experience. And in that reality, she finds freedom. She learns that vulnerability is not a liability to be managed, but a power to be embraced, because it allows her to grow, to heal, experience, and to rise with a strength that is unshakable precisely because it is human. Experience. To become her own anchor is to decide that she will no longer drift with the currents of circumstance or wait for someone else to steady her. Experience. The woman who builds herself alone understands that there will not always be a hand to hold or a voice to reassure her. Experience. She realizes that depending solely on others for stability leaves her at the mercy of their choices, their moods, their presence or absence. So she turns inward, and little by little, experience, she begins to construct a foundation within herself that can hold her steady no matter what storms rise around her. Being her own anchor does not mean she is never shaken. The waves still crash. Experience, the winds still roar, and there are days when everything feels uncertain. But instead of being swept away, she returns to the roots she has planted inside herself. Her values, her discipline, experience, her clarity of purpose, these become the weight that keeps her grounded. Each decision she makes, each boundary she sets, each promise she keeps to herself strengthens this anchor, experience, until she can stand firm even when the world around her trembles. This grounding does not come easily. It requires her to confront the temptation of waiting for someone else to save her, experience, the desire to be lifted instead of lifting herself. It means choosing responsibility over dependence, clarity over confusion, and consistency over excuses. Experience, it asks her to be brutally honest about who she is and what she needs, even when the truth is uncomfortable. And in that honesty, she finds a stability that no external validation can provide. Over time, experience, she begins to notice a shift. Where she once felt pulled in every direction, she now feels centered. Where she once looked outward for assurance, she now looks inward for strength. Experience. She learns that to be her own anchor is not to shut out the world, but to stand so firmly in herself that she can engage with the world without being consumed by it. She is not unmovable, but she is unbreakable. Experience. Because she knows that no matter what comes, she carries within her the grounding she needs to endure, to adapt, and to rise again.